Hey everybody, it's Lauren Marie Taylor. You know me as Vicky with the Ugly Brown Undies in Friday the 13th Part 2, and you are listening to The Movie Raid Show.
It's time for The Movie Raid. Tonight's victim is actress Lauren Marie Taylor that is playing Friday the 13th Part 2. He sees you when you're sleeping.
Hey, howdy, how are ya?
Do you have anything new, anything that we can expect in the coming weeks, like new cons or any other events?
I have a few things coming up that haven't been confirmed, but once they are, you can find them on my website, which is just my name, laurenmarietaylor.com, and I have an appearance page, and that's usually where it's always where I post my appearances, and you can click on the icon, it'll take you to the website with all the info. So that's that. I've got, right now, I worked with a director by the name of B. Harrison Smith, and we did the first full-length AI horror movie together, and it's called Slow Burn, and that's out right now on Rad TV. So that's very cool. So that's what's coming up, next. Desert Themes 2 is coming up. Loose Ends Victim No More Part 2 is coming up. Snake Manor just came out this past month. So there's a bunch of odd things that are coming out. And then Christmas at Aunt Betty's, which I just did with Eileen Dietz, that'll be coming out. I think they're premiering it at the New Jersey HorrorCon in May, but I'm not 100% sure.
You mentioned the AI movies. Like that's definitely a whole new ball game. Now, how does that affect you as a character actor? And as far as financial aspect of that, like, doesn't that kind of hurt you a little bit? I mean, how does that work out for this new technology for AI working on this for you?
Well, here's the thing: is I'm at the age where my husband and I are both sort of retired. We're semi-retired. We still do gigs here and there, and I like to liken it to when they first started doing animations, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Cinderella, and then, of course, Lady and the Tramp. They replaced all the dogs with animations. They didn't use real dogs. So it's kind of like that. It's not going to get rid of actors in movies getting paid for, under the umbrella of the union or whatever deals they work out. It's just a different form of artistic expression. And I don't think AI movies are going to take over. And let's face it, people who have done practical effects, even makeup artists, they've been taken over a little bit by CGI, which is why a lot of the current movies that are being made in the indie universe are going back to using the practical effects of the 70s, the 60s, the 80s. So I don't think it's really going to put a huge dent in the working actor's ability to get jobs. It's just a different form of expression. And it's very cool that I'm involved with something like that he approached me and trusted me to take on this project with him.
And there's always those different kind of generations of actors that have been from the 50s, the 80s, and so forth. And now that we have this new technology, and some of them are going back to practical effects on certain aspects, but do you feel that the younger generations are entering this? Does that become more easier for them than it was for when you guys, the way, in this case, the old school method? Some of the old generations, like, would you feel that they might be against the new technology? Do you feel like the film industry is becoming a little bit more than what it is, than what it used to be?
Oh, yeah, well, I'm a perfect example of that. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm 65 years old this year. My husband is 70, so we're part of that old school. He's from the 50s. I was grew up in the 60s. So we're part of that generation that is extremely old school filming. I mean, when we were doing work back in the 80s, you didn't have hundreds of people on set to, pick a hair off your jacket or, make sure your nail polish was absolutely perfect. Now you go on set for some of these TV shows and there are hundreds of people in the production. It's just shocking the way it is now. I mean, that alone, I feel like on TV shows, and I'm not dissing any actors in particular, but from what I've observed from being in that environment on TV shows, they're very spoiled. You know, there's a lot of cutting, there's a lot of lack of memorization sometimes by some of the actors. So that's kind of shocking to me. I don't think AI is going to solve that or replace it, like I said, but the person who I did this AI film with is closer to my generation. So you're talking about somebody who's also very old school in his filmmaking, but he sees this new frontier and he's experimental with the film medium. And I think the younger generation will kind of embrace it because the younger generation is into quick fixes, you know, or, you know, the whole TikTok generation, and now you see it, now you don't, now you're famous, now you're not. You know what I mean? So it'll just be one more thing for them to get involved with, to get excited about, to do, and then move on and do something else.
And performing in horror, like regardless of the size of the role, how does the story help you as far as the character aspect? Does it help create while you not just prepare, but does it help knowing what the story is to create that character, or do you feel it's better to just wing what you read of the character instead, vice versa?
Well, here's the thing. When we did Friday the 13th, part 2, you know, there was a description for the character that I eventually played. You know, all-American girl, very sweet, a little bookish. And so when we approached that movie, Steve Miner, the director, ran a very tight ship, and he trusted us to just really get a handle on our characters without a whole lot of, you know, over-directing and telling us what to do. So a classic example is the scene where Vicky and Mark, her cohort in the wheelchair, it's a scene that involves Jeff, Sandra, Vicky and Mark, and Sandra comes over and like leans in, pushes her, endowed body parts in the other character's face practically, and says, don't wear yourself out. So as a character choice, what I did as Vicky is I thought, okay, Vicky's going to copy her and try to act sexy, even though she's not supposed to be overtly sexy. So I made that choice in the fly at the moment, and Steve Miner was fine with it. Fast forward 40 some odd years to In a Violent Nature, and I was sent the script. I see, oh my gosh, this is a lot of lines, it's a lot of words. So, the director and I had talked about the character, but we didn't have any rehearsal or anything like that. I got to Canada, and it was like balls to the walls filming right away. So I had a version of how I thought the character would act and react with this damsel in distress, and Chris Nash just swooped right in. He goes, He said, let's have a discussion. And we actually took a couple of hours off set to hash out the character because he wrote the character. So his interpretation of the character was very different from my approach as a New Yorker. He's like, this chick lives in the middle of nowhere in Midwestern Canada. All she knows is her truck and hunting and her brother and wild animals and shooting things. So he was a very hands-on director when it came to the mysteriousness of the character of the woman. You didn't know whether you could trust her or if she was going to turn around and say to Johnny, hey, here you go, here's the girl that you've been chasing, I got her for you. You know what I mean?
And performance can be, as far as long hours or anything, performance can affect through such hard effort, but how did it affect being in, such as a character actor yourself, when you have to shoot it for, let's say, X amount of days or even hours upon hours? Do you feel that it's more manageable today onto the roles that you get today in comparison, let's say, Friday 13th too?
Well, Friday 13th, we lived at the camp, so we were living horror. We were living the whole experience. And, I was young. I was 19 years old, and, you don't sleep when you're 19, you just don't, you go to college, you don't sleep, you just enjoy yourself. And that's how it was for that. And then, again, like I said before, fast forward to my first big movie role, in a long time, and it's in a violent nature, and we're filming from sunrise to sunset. And I drove all the way to Midwestern Canada. It was very different, but you know what your job is. And I have a lot of energy. My husband likes to say I have unusual amount of adrenal in my adrenal in my glands, and so I have a lot of adrenaline. I don't tucker out easily at this age when it comes to long hours. It's like when I'm done, then I crash. But when I'm on set, I'm completely on target, in the moment, and ready to turn on a dime as the director wishes. And I was actually driving that truck in a violent nature, so it was like all senses were on, all.
Does it also affect you the same way if you were to get more roles in television as well, or is that a little bit different ballpark in comparison to doing the other films?
Television is such a different animal in a way. You got a couple cameras going at once. You have that in movies up to a certain extent. They did for Christmas at Aunt Betty's. But there's just a lot more, at least my experience has been, there's a lot more stop and go. Because you do an episode over a period of several days. Whereas the movie, you're doing a movie over a period of weeks and weeks, but it's like, you got to get these scenes done today. This is the budget. I don't know. It's just my experience is just, it's so varied, because I was on a soap opera for 12 years too, so everything is just very different.
And looking back at most popular cult classic franchises that we know today, like Friday the 13th, Halloween, and many others even before that are a household name, but just taking a small sample of your role in Friday the 13th too, do you feel that these kind of roles of today, it seems a little bit too cinematic than focusing on the surrealness of the situation between the victim and the character, or whichever what the story itself is focusing on?
Well, I think that's when you go back to new filmmakers wanting to be more true to the 80s slasher style, where you're more intimate with the killer and the character. He's right there. What I find is different between the early parts of the franchise and now is, this is terrible. I'm not accusing anybody of anything once again, but I chalk a lot of it up to a large amount of plastic surgery, if you know what I mean. So, you had the innocence of walking through a camp in shorts and looking cute and having a normal body, normal face, and now everybody looks like a Barbie doll. You know what I mean? That's where I see just a huge disconnect between early parts of our franchises and where they are now. It's just there's a lot of emphasis, looking like a Kardashian, even in horror movies. And I think it disconnects the audience from the character, because the audience can't look at this character and go, oh, that's me. It's like, oh gosh, look at that. I'll never be that. It becomes a preoccupation when somebody has had a lot of work done and you can't relate to that character. You can't relate even to their survival. That's what I liked about In Violent Nature. All the ladies, and the guys obviously, they were natural. They weren't all pumped up, plumped up, and everything up, Botox stuff or anything like that. They looked like the old school, you and me type of characters. That could be me. That could be you.
Do you also feel like you need to be selective on certain roles, because there's so much of this attractiveness, and of course this has been going on for a millennium in film history, but do you feel like there's too much of this attractiveness? There's not the whole girl next door, or girl on a bike, and then we learn what these type of characters are later on in the story. Do you feel that it's a little bit more different, or do you feel that it is become a little bit too polished these days?
Yeah, in a way it is. You don't spend. I mean, not all movies are like this. Don't get me wrong. There are some movies that really do take the time to get to know the characters, and you have a more intimate relationship with the characters. But a lot of them, a lot of gore is just like, oh, here you are, boom, you're dead. Here you are, boom, you're dead. And it's a different style within the genre, depending on what somebody's personal tastes are, depending on the director, depending on the killer, what the director's vision is, and making money, what appeals to the masses. That's a big part of it too, obviously.
Do you feel that kind of attractiveness is mainly on the victim these days in today's horror? Like, when you start out to become this victim in a horror film, usually it's like, okay, cool, it's my first role, or it's my whatever role in my major debut, or whatever it is. But fast forward in today's horror, do you feel like now people are more interested about the victim of, even if they're dead, what kind of person they were and so forth? Do you feel that is more of the focus rather than it's not the killer anymore, or it's not so and so anymore?
I mean, when you talk about attractiveness, look at the recent Frankenstein movie. You know, the guy who was Frankenstein had a rockin' body. So even though he was your traditional Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster, I should say, not Dr. Frankenstein, he, you look at him, you go, wow, okay. Like Dracula. Dracula was considered sexy. I volunteered by John Eric. So there's that strange dichotomy between a horror and a killer and just horror, and thinking, well, actually, it's kind of appealing, I want to bite your neck, or look at this hot body they put together for me as Frankenstein's monster. Yeah, those are my thoughts about that, I think.
But when it comes to like the female role leads, like, do you feel like they use that attractiveness for the female role leads specifically? And because back then it was like pretty much like the victim's like, okay, attractiveness, really cute and so forth, and then there she's gone. But now she's the lead role, attractive, but it kind of loses its edge a little bit. Like, oh, we're not going to give her a chance to survive or anything. Like, it's just going to run and die. Do you feel like that's still kind of repetitive in today's horror?
Yeah. It's, again, it's a formula. Horror movies have a formula. I haven't seen any of the new installments in any of the franchises recently. Like the Scream franchise. I haven't seen any of the new ones of that. The Terrifier universe, I haven't really seen that, but I do feel like the whole damsel in distress thing might still be there, but I can't really talk to it right now because I haven't seen the more recent stuff. I only know, just whatever I've watched. I've watched a lot of documentaries, that's my problem, to tell you the truth.
and of course, horror is like, when it comes to like blood, gore, and intensity is always a great thing. But do you feel in some cases, or at least of today's what they're pumping out now, it kind of jeopardizes on certain characters, whether it's a victim or not? And then again, they just want you to go to this point. Do you feel like there's more of that intensity kind of, ignoring some of these characters on some of these films?
I mean, like I said, I haven't really seen a whole lot of them recently. My brother's really into horror movies, so he'll say, hey, you gotta check this out, or hey, you gotta check this out. And if there is kind of like a how gross can you get factor about some of these movies, you know what I mean? Like, I think about a movie like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and just how creepy and how moody it was, and that's the kind of stuff that I like. I'm not so crazy about some guy running around like, the worst ones. What are those Saw movies? Those I can't watch. Now I can watch Final Destination because they give you time to kind of care about the lead people at least. But the whole, guy in a mask running around killing people willy-nilly, I don't find it appealing, and I don't know. I just don't.
And do you feel like sometimes when these horror films, regardless, not even if it's not a franchise specifically, but let's say the build-up is usually the most important part of that, but do you feel like they oftentimes shorten that build-up or even ignore the build-up altogether, and we just jump right to this point, and then you're not really letting the audience go along for the ride? Do you feel today's horror is just a little bit, in some cases, cheapened because they want to get more money out rather than savoring the money to generate more money?
Well, that's why In a Violent Nature got so much gruff from a lot of people in the horror community. The critics loved it. It went to the midnight showing at the Sundance Film Festival. That's not an easy feat to be able to do, especially for a little indie film from Canada. I mean, it was a big deal. New York Times gave it a rave review, but a lot of people didn't like it. They said it moved too slowly. They felt like the build-up took too long to get to those kills. I'm not sure what they're going to do with the new one. He just wrapped on the new one. I'm not a part of it, and neither is the final girl from the first In a Violent Nature, but just the feedback from not everybody, obviously. I mean, a lot of fans loved the movie. They really did. But there was a core group that said, you know what, this was boring. I was bored. It took too long to get to the kills. And that's what, you think, okay, a lot of people do like that, like you said, that instant gore. Right away. Just give it to me right away. Some people like to wait.
And I'm being a part of a very well-known franchise and being one of the victims that everybody does recognize, do you feel like whatever role that involves a role like that, do you feel that you do have that say that, hey, of what kind of character that you want to be, when even though they have the majority of the saying, but what type of character that you would like to drive that when it comes to that kind of role?
No, I've had a few people write things for me. We've talked about that. But if, like when He Sees You When You're Sleeping, Snake Manor, the Forest Hills director's cut, which I just did also, they bring you the role. They contacted me and they said, oh, we have a great role that's for you. It's already formed by the writer. Can you say, hey, I'd like to do this with it during the process of filming? Absolutely. But unless you're in on the ground floor with the writer-director, forming this character together as they're writing it, which can happen, you just say, all right, well, send me the script and I'll take a look at it and see if it's something I'll do. As I said so many times to some of the young directors out there who've contacted me and said, hey, I'm going to be doing a film next year. Once we get all the funding from whatever platforms they're getting funding for, we'll send you, the script. And I've gotten a couple of them that I like already. I always joke around with them. I say, can you please just make me a crazy cat lady? And they don't. They never do. And that's all I want to do. I just want one movie where I can be that nosy neighbor with, 18 cats and who's crazy and like Crazy Ralph. I would love to be a female Crazy Ralph in something, but that hasn't happened yet.
But what would you consider as anyone that hasn't actually been in any kind of major type of debut films like Friday the 13th and so forth, but let's say they've been in a decent one of a horror film, but how does one get on the ground floor with that director just so they can get better development of their own character, let alone the direction they're heading into that genre?
Well, you got to know somebody, that's for sure. I mean, if you're just starting out as an actor, unless you have friends or you're in college and you're part of a film club and, you decide to do a film together. I've done a couple of shorts for students at New York University here in New York City. And, it's always fun to do this for them because, they're fans, but they're young, they've got their own crew, they've written these characters, and if there's a younger actor in it, then that actor has been in class with them and has developed the story and their character with them. But a lot of times, they hire professionals, like yours truly. Unless you've been around the block several times and you have a reputation, chances of a director coming up to an actor who's just starting out and saying, hey, we'd like to develop a script with you, it's probably not going to happen unless you've been cited the best performance of the year and nominated for all kinds of awards for your first movie. You're like a Timothy Chalamet or something like that. Then it'll happen. But for the average actor, 99% of actors out there, it doesn't work that way. You have to audition for a role. If you're young and you're in film school, or you have friends who are doing a film and they're like, hey, you want to do a film with us? Then you can say, yeah, can I have some say in this character? Because it's your friends. Then that works. But otherwise, it's going to be the same route that it's been for years, where you audition and you hope you get the role. And then when you get on set, you can show them your stuff and see if you can work with the director on just character development. But a writer, they ain't going to change anything if you're just a hired actor. They're going to be like, no, you say what I've written, okay? That's it. But for me, taking these roles or having these roles written for me, I'm just tickled pink. It's not about, oh my God, I'm going to make this money, I'm going to make that money. That's not, what it's about. I've had an amazingly diverse career and happy for it. You know, when I do community theater, when I was doing community theater several years ago, I didn't get paid to do that. I did it for fun. You know, obviously, if you're young and, you know, obviously, you know, you got to join the union, you got to get paid and all that stuff. But like I said, I get paid, but that's not why I do it. I don't do it for the money. And I like supporting roles. It's, even in Violent Nature, I was a supporting role, but I'm blabbering for 10 minutes.
And when it comes to the scripts that you not commonly read, but should that actor always be more cautious of what they're actually reading? And now, oftentimes, you know, it's hard in the film industry, let alone try to get any kind of roles, especially now. But there are times where they have to accept really bad written scripts and then really bad low budget, no budget movies just to make a couple dollars. Do you feel that that's always has to be an option forcibly for that artist?
If you're trying to get your foot in the door and you're trying to get what they call tape on yourself or film on yourself, yeah, you probably have to do stuff like that now. I mean, you know, again, when I was a young actor, it was a smaller pond. You didn't have YouTube or TikTok or anything like that. You know, you didn't have crowdsourcing, nothing. It was just, you audition, you get the role, you do it. Now it's so competitive. Everybody needs to get what's called a reel, which is like a 2.5, 3-minute. It's on my website. I have a reel up on my website. I have fan favorite reel, and then I have my professional reel. And a professional helped me put it together. And she said, Lauren Marie, you know, you got to grab them in the first couple minutes. She said, you can only put a couple of things on this reel. So if you feel as though you're in a quote bad movie, you know, you do your best job so that you can put a reel together as an actor, so that you can have, even if it's a 30-second scene, you still do it because you're going to do your best. You're going to do your best work, and that's what the casting directors are going to see. They're not going to go and sit and watch your 30-minute short that you did that you thought was horrible. I've been fortunate that all the shorts that I've done have been absolutely wonderful and very professional with these young guys. But let's say, you know, like you said, if you're an actor and you don't think it's very good, but you do it anyway because you A, the money, but B, more importantly, you need film for your reel. And so I would recommend doing it, even if you don't think it's like, oh, well, I don't win an Academy Award. Yeah, it's not going to happen. But if you do your best job, then you've got something to show for it for the next audition. Because everybody's got to have a reel. If you're an actor, you got to have something. Because that's what they look at. They don't so much look at your picture anymore. Oh, it's been retouched. You know, it's retouched. You don't look like that. They want to see what you look like when you talk. You know, how do your eyes dance? How do they not dance if you're supposed to be deadpanning? Yeah, that's my recommendation.
Well, go ahead and plug in your website and any other future projects that once again, or anything else that you would like to add to this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just got my LaurenMarieTaylor.com, which try to keep up on. It's been a little difficult, but I try to update it every few weeks. I have to do it again. And then there's my Instagram, which is Lauren Marie Taylor 1. You know, my name was just the number 1 behind it. Also, my married name comes up on that too. So people are like, well, is this really her? And I'm like, yeah, look at the picture, it's me. So yeah, and then the project's coming up. You know, Desert Fiends 2 will be coming out. Slow Burn is already out on Rad TV. Snake Manor just came out. Loose Ends Victim No More Part 2 and the Forest Hills Director's Cut. Those should all be coming out. And then I have a couple of shorts that I did that are going to some of the film festivals. So, yeah, but it's all, hopefully I'll be able to put everything on my website. It gets a little crowded, so I might have to just clean it up a little bit. Thanks for asking, though.
There you have it, everybody. That is Lauren Marie Taylor.